What got you initially started with psychedelics and like that curiosity?
Yeah, I wish I had a great story that I was ready to go and I knew I needed to come to psychedelics, and that's not true at all. I had some friends who had suggested that I participate with them. They had hired a guide and had set up a whole ceremony and said, hey, we're doing this. Do you want to come? I was like, I don't know. It's not really my thing. I'm not a drug person. I don't drink that much. It's and they really nudged me and said, you love to travel. And this is like taking a journey in your mind, and you love to learn. And there's no better way to learn about yourself. And this will probably be good for you. And maybe they knew me better than I knew myself at that point. So I just did it. And into the experience, just couldn't believe how beautiful and profound of an experience. I was like, I need to know more about what this is and how this works. And it completely changed my life since that moment.
That's a really big leap of faith. Like a really big leap of faith. I also, I didn't really drink a ton. I had never done drugs growing up. My dad was a cop, so
He frowned upon that?
It wasn't even frowned. It was like this is going to sound probably like out of bounds, and it probably is, but I guess it worked. So I watched at a very young age. He had me watch one of like those true crime kind of things. And all I remember like seared into my mind was like, when they do like the flashback and it's all dramatic with the music. And they're like, and when they recovered her body 3 hours later, it was still at 115 degrees. She had cooked from the inside out. And I was like, I am never doing drugs at all. And he made me think that like any drug would kill you. Like everything was deadly. So I had a ton of fear around it. So the first time that I even smoked weed, I thought I was going to overdose, because that's how ignorant I was to anything. I was like, everything is bad, deadly, dangerous, and it's going to make you be like this very lazy person and not be like a functioning member of society. Like the very like straight line kind of narrative that I think a lot of us were raised on. So when like this stuff, when psychedelics started becoming more popularized, it took a lot of I guess like unraveling of my own ideas that I had about it, because I wanted to go in with a beginner's mindset. Mm-hmm. I didn't want to like have all these, because I had never done it. So I'm like, everything I'm basing my ideas on this plant is not like firsthand knowledge, and it's not from anyone that's like actually successfully used it for like healing purposes. It's just from one narrative, and that was like from the law. Mm-hmm. So the more I learned about it, the more I'm like, this seems like there's a lot of possibility. And then Johns Hopkins started doing their studies with MAPS, and I'm like, well, if they're doing it, there is something. But yeah, to take that leap of faith is pretty massive, because I would have been scared out of my boots. I remember my first one we did with Roger, and I did it by myself. In the Uber ride there, I was like just trembling. I was like, I have no idea what I'm in for. And I love Roger and I trust him with everything. So I can't imagine not knowing the facilitator, what that would be like. And did you do psilocybin for your first one? I did.
About 5-6 grams of psilocybin for that first journey.
Holy cow! Yeah. I did 3, and I was like, whoa!
It was a big one. It took me deep in. Had a ego death and had connection with my mom, who died when I was younger, and
wow.
It was incredible. It is interesting though. All of us, anyone born after 1970, all we've known is prohibition.
Yes.
So you talk about this is the law's perspective, and sure it is. It was definitely your father's perspective, but it's also everywhere we look in society. As we grew up, it was just say no, drugs are bad, there's no medicinal use, they're going to fry your brains, you're going to get addicted, you're going to get hurt. And everywhere, and I'm sure in lots of books you've read, magazines, television, that message that your father is giving you is reinforced.
Right.
So those of us working in the psychedelic medicine space, this is one of our biggest challenges is overcoming 50 years of programming. And people hear psychedelics, it's like, ooh, that's dangerous. LSD, part of the reason there's not as much research now on LSD as there is on some of these other medicines is there is just so much baggage that came along during those years, and it just wasn't worth the fight.
So interesting, because the more transparency, I guess, that we have now because of the internet, the more you realize how much of an agenda there was when it comes to psychedelics. So I remember I think it might have been one of the Dare commercials for weed, and it had the frying pan with your
and the eggs.
Yeah, and the eggs for your brain. But that was funded by like the alcohol companies. So it's really interesting when you ask yourself, and again, if you really take your bias out of the picture, you're like, why are these things illegal? when alcohol is legal, like I can go buy a bottle of Jack and like do way more damage to myself than I can do with cannabis. Like that's just a fact. Like cannabis isn't going to kill me. I don't think anyone has ever died from weed. Like that's like a good fact check, but I don't believe so.
And there's lots of really great research out there about where they take psychotropic drugs and they talk about what is the harm of this particular drug to yourself or to others, and what is more or less. So they've done ratings of different drugs. And if you look at the charts with these, on the far left-hand side, you see things like alcohol, tobacco, heroin. But sticking with just alcohol and tobacco, perfectly legal. Not a lot of discussion about. It's perfectly legal.
Right.
On the far right-hand side of those charts, a fraction of the harm would be things like LSD, psilocybin, even ecstasy is far in that right-hand, MDMA is far in that right-hand side. So what is scheduled as illegal has nothing to do with science. And it's just, and you're right, the internet has been really helpful in getting people to understand that, come to their own conclusions and realize, oh, we were fed a bunch of nonsense for all these years, and now that's overturning.